I've been working for the last 3 or 4 years on a project called The Impact of Social Sciences, which was a hefty funded project with colleagues at the universities of Leeds, Imperial College London, and us at the London School of Economics. And we were looking at how academic work, specifically in the social sciences, but also more generally, has an impact on government, on business, on civil society and public engagement. Thankfully for us, the book is now out, and I promise this will be the last plug that I'll do. But this is the book, The Impact of Social Sciences, which came out in January this year. Now, I mean, whatever you think about the impact agenda, for us, we found that impact was a really interesting lens to look at what academics do, the ways in which they communicate, and the issues around opening up academic work. And so a really very practical output of our project was that we now run 6 academic blogs. So we found during our research that many academics, especially those in the social sciences, were much less likely to put any of their work up online than, for example, those in the science community. They were much less likely to even have an online profile, even one that was created via their university's website. So we found there was this real problem of invisibility for academic work in the digital environment. And so we created our first academic blog in 2010. It wasn't something that we were expecting to do. It wasn't something we'd written into our project plan. We created our first one around the general election, time of the general election, because we wanted to sort of profile the work that was going on in academia that was relevant for the discussions going on in the run-up to that general election. It was very well received, and so over the next 4 years we rolled out other blogs focusing on issues around politics and policy in different locations. But the one that I think has really caught the attention of the academic community is our Impact of Social Sciences blog, which is this one with our nice shiny new logo. And that has created a real sort of community and network around issues of impact, but also issues around how it is to be an academic now, about academic communication, and a lot of interest around open access. So I wanted to take this as the sort of the trigger for this presentation. This is actually a quote from a blog post that an academic at UCL called Melissa Terras did for us. And she has been working on looking at her own impact, so how social media plus open access works for her publications. And this was a formula that she came up with. And I do now try and do a tweet-length summary of my presentations, and this is a tweet-length summary. So if that's what you'd like to do, then this is the one that I would go for, because she felt, and I think this is something that our experience has really lived out, that that open access and social media work very well together. Social media, as I put here, amplifies the benefits of open access. And I think there's another point to that, which is that it will take time for us to get to whatever models of open access are adopted. Whereas social media can have an effect now. Social media is something that in the short term can help to open up academic work, can help to disseminate research, but can also work alongside as we move towards the open access models that will be adopted. So I just want to take a slight step back now and talk to you a little bit about a model that we developed when we were writing our impact book, about how knowledge is created and used. We felt that the models of impact that were being discussed were maybe rather too linear for the way that we felt impact was happening. It seemed to be maybe more suited to a science model of impact than for us in the social sciences. So it seemed a little bit more like a drug is created, a certain number of people take that drug, and then benefits as a result, i.e. they're not any more sick. We know that impact in the social sciences don't really happen that way. We know that it's much more cumulative, it's much more incremental. And so we created this idea of a dynamic knowledge inventory to try and show a closer model of impact for the social sciences. But I think this does also apply to other disciplines when we're thinking about just how knowledge is created and used. So we called it dynamic to show that this was constantly evolving. Obviously, academics feed knowledge into the DKI, but academics aren't the only actors in society who produce and mediate research. This is also done by a wide range of other organisations, so in government, charities, those in the media, and they play a key mediation role here. So work is picked up by these actors, it's used, it's improved, it's modified, and then it's churned back into the existing stock of knowledge. So this slightly odd shape here is supposed to represent all knowledge. And we can distinguish between knowledge that's currently in use and knowledge that is latent or not currently in use. So I guess the picture there is sitting on a dusty shelf in a book that nobody can get access to. Knowledge also comes in different types. There's ordinary knowledge that we learn by doing. There's applied knowledge and research that you can argue is the type that's most useful to those outside universities. And then there's theory-based, abstract knowledge and research. And the mediation role of those external actors can also help to bring knowledge from this very theory-based side more into the realm of the applied knowledge by using it. So what role do I think social media can play here in terms of the dynamic knowledge inventory? Well, there's 2 points. The first is that it helps the churn of the knowledge between that that's not currently being used and those that is. And so you can see the greater number of arrows there. So it helps quality research be recognised. It helps to reduce the time it takes for research and knowledge to become publicly accessible, to get to those mediators who are going to be able to use that research in a way that helps them in their role in government, in business, wherever they are. Secondly, it also helps to make this blue section, the knowledge currently in use, bigger. So it increases the amount of knowledge that's in use both inside and outside universities. And social media can also help to mediators bring this theory-based abstract knowledge into the realms of applied knowledge so that it can be used. So that's about mediation, how we need those external actors to help us as academics mediate the work that we do to make it useful for those outside universities. But there's also an aspect here of how those within universities, within academia, find out about our work. And for that, we talk about radical disintermediation. Something that a lot of academics said to us when we were doing our research was, we can't do everything as academics. We can't try and publish all of the things that we're supposed to publish and also think about being externally visible, using social media, having impact, trying to work out how to create partnerships and collaborations with those outside universities. So as part of our research, we put together a data set of 360 academics, randomly chosen from around the UK. And we looked at them in detail. So we created scales for them to look at how often they published and the type of things that they were publishing. but also a scale in terms of their external visibility. How externally visible are they? How many different types of organisations are referencing their work in reports, in the press? And if it was the case that academics couldn't do both of those things at the same time, you would expect to see the dots here, which each represent an academic, hugging those two axes. So academics were kind of having to choose one or the other. That isn't what we found. The blue blob here represents about a third of our sample, and we found that this third were really able to do both. They were publishing, but they were also being able to be externally visible by taking part in academic and practitioner networks, or by being on panels, or by giving evidence to Parliament, a whole range of things. But really, they were a third of those academics that were able to do both this academic role plus also be externally visible. But we also found a big chunk of academics in our sample who were in this publisher set. So they were really feeling that they needed to just head down and publish as much as possible. And so it seemed that much of their work may lie unmediated. So what would make a difference here? How could some of this work in this publisher category and also the invisibles category, how could that work be made more visible? And again, here is where I see a role for social media. It helps academics to talk directly to those who might be interested in their research. So here's the disintermediation part, because instead of having to wait for mediators to come and do some of that translation role for us, we as academics can now talk directly to policymakers, to business leaders, to those in the general public by using social media. So I've got two kind of sections here. I wanted to talk about how social media can help individual academics open up their work, and then also look at how social media can help on a more sort of system-wide level. But firstly, we know academic communication is changing, and social media is allowing easier dissemination of our research and quicker. And also, as academics, we are observers of the world, and we need to be able to communicate our research to those who might be interested in it in a timely fashion. And some of the timelines for the publishing in academia, the time it takes for outputs to become public, just goes against that, being able to disseminate in a timely way what we do. This is a horrific statistic that was doing the rounds on Twitter over the last couple of months. It's actually from a 2007 physics article, which said that 90% of all academic papers published in journals are never cited. It actually said not read by anyone other than the author and the editor of the journal and the reviewers, so it went even further than that. Someone who took slight issue with this and thought it might be a bit of an urban myth was an academic called Delia Remler, who wrote something up for us on the Impact blog. She did a systematic review of all of the papers on Google Scholar that talked about how often academic work is cited, and these were the figures that she came up with. She couldn't find any 90%, so that thankfully looks like it might be a bit of an urban myth. But as you can see, there's a real range in terms of the percentage of papers that are on average cited in particular disciplines, with 12% in medicine not cited, whereas in the humanities 82%, which is incredibly high. So we know that even within academia, it's very hard to get your research out to those who might be interested in it. And for many, just putting it into a journal, whether that's closed or open access, is not sufficient to make sure that those who might be interested in it are able to see it. Whereas from our experience on the blogs, we can see that the readership for individual blog posts can far outstrip that of an average journal article. And this shows you the number of unique page views for posts across the Impact blog for the last 6 months. And as you can see, the majority, so around 80 posts, have had between 100 and just under 500 views in that 6 months period. Obviously, some of them will be much newer than that, so will increase over time because we have a very long tail now, so that's much better. We've had 3 posts that had over 10,000 views, and just to show the kind of thing that are most popular on the Impact blog, their titles were How Academia Resembles a Drug Gang, which instantly makes you want to read it, and a post from my co-author Patrick Dunleavy, which was entitled Why Do Academics Choose Useless Titles? So I think you can see why those were most popular. But it's not just individual blog posts. We can see that there's an increase in the number of people coming to the blogs across all of our blogs. And we feel that there's a real appetite for those both within academia but also outside to get to see academic research in this way, in this short, accessible way. So why do academics blog with us? What do they tell us about why they blog with us? They do tell us that it enables them to take more control of how they disseminate their work rather than waiting for others to do it for them. They say that it enables them to get comments and feedback more quickly than waiting for a journal article to come out. That does, of course, also have a downside in that you are very quickly open to maybe more critical comments than you might have liked. You can get involved in discussions very quickly with those who are not within academia and so may have different views to you. But it really does mean that you are part of online discussions where often knowledge brokers are who are able to take up your research and use it very quickly. So that was sort of evidence from our experience, from the blogs that we've done. So I just wanted to talk very quickly about the evidence that we are seeing people discuss on the blogs from their points of view. This nice figure is from a team at the World Bank who looked at downloads and abstract views of an article that after the Freakonomics, the economics blog, had discussed it in a blog post. And as you can see, that had quite an immediate effect and dramatic effect. But it's good to see that it also applies to downloads. So that means that readers aren't just reading that blog post, they are then taking an extra step and downloading a full text article. And we do link to full text articles on all our blog posts where that's relevant, often open access versions that live in library online repositories. So this is how we see the blogs fitting so well with open access moves, because a reader can come to a post via a tweet that just catches their eye, they can read a post, they can find out more about the academic who wrote it, and they can also potentially download a full text version with more details if they're interested in doing that. We're also seeing that research groups are using social media in order to, again, push the dissemination of their work. And this was something that the National Centre for Research Methods did. They wanted to compare using Twitter to disseminate a report that they'd just done with their more traditional ways of disseminating, which was via an email bulletin and in a hard copy newsletter. And as you can see, the tweets that they did mean more people downloaded the report than those other forms. And also, you might occasionally be tweeted by BBC Radio 1 resident psychotherapist. So, that's another positive boon for that. But it also, we can see, works for individual academics. This is Melissa Terras, as I mentioned at the beginning, and Melissa's been tracking how useful social media has been in helping her papers be downloaded more, and this was the profile that she found for one of her recent reports that had just been put into the UCL online repository in the library, but just combining that open access with her own social media use, so the use of Twitter, and this shows the increased profiles of downloads that she found. So that's about helping more people read your research. It's quite a sort of simple one. But the other very strong message that academics talked to us about when we were doing our research was that social media can facilitate interdisciplinary and collaborative research, which as part of our project we found tended to be more highly cited. As you can see here, most of the outputs from the data set of 360 academics that we put together were single-authored pieces, but most of the citations went to pieces that had at least one other author, so it had at least 2 authors. And open access, I think, also is something that people see very strongly as helping to facilitate collaborative research, both within academia and also external to academia. So this is something that we see as a real positive benefit of both social media and open access. So then I wanted to talk about social media to open up research to mediators. Now this is something that we found from our data set. We looked at all of the publications for our 360 academics, and then we tracked the references to them and grouped them in terms of traditional academic, which, as you might expect, are references that come from academic publishers, from libraries, from departments within universities. We also found references that we felt were properly external, so they were in government documents, they were in charity reports, they were in private sector literature. But we found this interesting bit that we called the mediating middle. And these are organisations who are helping to mediate academic research from within universities to those outside in the hopes that it will be useful. And these are organisations like the press, like research institutes and think tanks, like professional and learned societies and networks. And these groups seem to be the perfect target for the use of social media to reach them, and then they are then able to use that research to mediate and translate it to those outside universities. For example, Colin Talbot and Carol Talbot at Manchester University have just done a survey of policymakers, of senior policymakers, and asked them about how they use academic research, what they want from it. But this is actually just that what routes do they use to get hold of academic research. And as you can, I hope you can see that top there at 79% is research reports and papers, but second at 61% is newspapers. So we can see that journalists are key mediators for that particular audience of academic work. And we know that journalists are coming to the blog because we can track them through our Google. That sounds awful, but we can see that they're accessing the blog through the Google Analytics that we have. And we can also start to see journalists using quotes directly from blog posts that academics have written for us. We see that they're using the name of our blog, which they don't often do, which isn't a problem at all as long as they use the name of the academic that wrote the piece. But we can really see that audience are actively using social media in order to pull in academic research and create pieces that are then picked up by, for example, in this case, policymakers. Now, most universities are making corporate use of social media. This is a piece of work that somebody did for us on the Impact blog about how visible UK universities were in terms of social media. I won't go on about it too much because it's got us right at the top and that just looks embarrassing. But what we also did a survey of 60 UK universities and 10 comparator overseas universities to look at their knowledge exchange activities. And we found that most universities were not making most use of social media to link to key tools like online repositories. Now, we have the HEFGI policy. I know you've heard from Ben this morning, so we know what that policy is going to look like. And so universities need to be able to work with the tools that they have, like the online repositories, with their social media profiles, in order to make sure that that is working very well. We found, although 99% university have a Facebook page, 97% have Twitter, those were not linking into the online repositories, and the repositories weren't linking out to those kind of social media tools. So universities still have some way to go to link up these tools to make sure that they work most effectively. So I just wanted to end with a couple of kind of scenarios for how social media might go in terms of thinking about the visibility of academic research. This is a post by a US academic called Jesse Daniels, and it's called From Tweet to Blog Post to Peer-Reviewed Article, How to Be a Scholar Now. And I thought this was a really interesting case because it is just Jessie talking about how at a conference she'd had a kind of thought about a gap in the literature. She tweeted it at the conference. A number of colleagues came back to her to say, do you know, I think that is a gap, and maybe we should do something about it. She curated a series of blog posts following that, and which created a lot of discussion. She then wrote that up into an article which was accepted into a journal. And she was kind of discussing how that isn't at all how we were all taught how to be scholars, but it's something that social media has allowed her to do in a way of opening up how scholarship is done, actually. And I think that was a really sort of positive message for me. But the second scenario is maybe a little bit more downbeat. This is a piece of work by Mewburn and Thompson, and they did a small-scale study of 100 blogs looking at the subjects that were being discussed and the formats that were being used on the blogs. And they found that rather than be a sort of real source of knowledge exchange, many of these sites were just the same conversations happening between academics as were going on in other fora. Maybe a bit shorter, maybe a bit more accessible, but they weren't sites of knowledge exchange with those outside universities. And the danger there is that we just replicate offline habits and talk amongst ourselves.